It's a Thursday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. We are back together, Damichael Cole and I, Joe Mullinax. We're talking Ja Morant's shooting slump. It's all fun and games until you actually dig into the numbers. Plus, who should be Memphis's number one option in clutch time? And of course, Kevin Durant rumors. It wouldn't be a week without talking about Kevin Durant going to the Memphis Grizzlies. It's Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host, Joe Mullinax, joined by my co-host, Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. Make sure you're following him on X if you don't already do so, at Damichael C. Does tremendous work as the Grizzlies beat writer for the Commercial Appeal. Make sure you're following me on X, at Joe Mullinax, if you want to get angry online every once in a while. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. As proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, literally anywhere you get a podcast. We can be a part of your Memphis Grizzlies and NBA content consumption each and every day. And make sure you're subscribing to Locked On Daily, our free daily newsletter. I would say my favorite newsletter so far. I wrote yesterday to Michael.
I enjoyed it.
Ja Morant.
You are an artist with that one. I can tell you took your time with that one. Like I felt what you were saying. You know.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm the master of the fluff piece, going back to my days at GBB. So, Ja Morant finding a smile, all those sorts of things. Check it out. Subscribe, LockedOnDaily.com. Again, free daily newsletter, LockedOnDaily.com. Between Damichael and myself, you've come to the right place for Memphis Grizzlies conversation for the next 30 minutes or so. Speaking of conversation, we need to have a talk, Damichael, because we're going to talk more about Ja Morant as a number one option. You know, Sean Coleman posted something on X, I think, later on in the show. I think later on in the show, it's going to be a fairly straightforward answer, but I'm going to contradict myself. I'm warning, I'm foreshadowing here.
Okay.
It's okay to be worried about Ja Morant's shooting because it's not just, one game of shooting 1 for 12 from three and the one make being that unbelievably clutch.
It was
fading to his left.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he made the one that mattered the most, but Ja Morant is having his worst scoring season since his sophomore season back in 2020, 2021. 110.9 points per shot attempt, according to Cleaning the Glass. He's not finishing well at the rim, which is something that he's supposed to be really good at, right? At his peak, he's shooting 66% or so at the rim, 58% at the rim this season, according to Cleaning the Glass. The three-point shooting doesn't concern me as much. He's shooting better this year than he was last year. Now, obviously, it was a much smaller sample size. You go to the larger size of 2022, 2023, he shot 32% from three. This year, he's shooting 31%. So I think we probably just need to accept Ja for what he is as a 33-ish% from the three-point line shooter. I'm worried about his finishing at the rim. I'm worried about his floater and how he's finishing with that. He's only hitting 42% of his mid-range jumpers. That would be his lowest since the 2021-2022 season. He is just not putting the ball in the bucket the way he has in the past. And again, I'm going to contradict myself here in about 10 minutes. But in the here and now, I am concerned about his shooting numbers because we have a big enough sample size to suggest that he's having a down year on that front.
Yeah, I think you made an important distinction there, or clarification notice when you kind of described what you were trying to get at with that. We're not talking about just three-point shooting here. We're talking about the mid-range shooting where the numbers are down, as you just alluded to. And I filtered it out a little bit, too, when we're talking about the three-point shooting because the one season that he shot lower percentage-wise was last season in 51 attempts. So if you say, hey, let's go over 75 at least in the seasons where he's had at least 100 three-point attempts, which is every other season, including this one, except last season when he played 9 games. You filter it out at least 100 three-point attempts in a season. This is Ja's worst three-point percentage season to date. And I think part of that kind of plays into the numbers that we're seeing from two-point range. I think The new offense plays into that as well. It's less pick and roll. So, how many times did we see Steven Adams, with those screen assists kind of helping him out get some of those easy floaters and things like that? There are a lot of moving pieces here, but the question is, are we worried? Are we concerned? And here's my answer. I am, because I don't think it's something that's going to be fixed before the season ends. I think anybody who's realistic knows that. Like, it is something that we've talked about the last 3 off seasons. Like, oh, is this the year that Ja Morant's going to come back shooting better? And I remember it was before last season. Or the season before last. I get them all mixed up at this point, Joe. But there was a couple seasons ago, he came in and he was shooting better from 3-point range. It was like the first 8-9 games of the season. No, it wasn't last season. It wasn't at the 25 game suspension. It was the year before that. So it was the year after he won Most Improved. It was the 51 win season. And he comes back that year and he starts the season off. You look up the numbers. I think like first 9-10 games, he was shooting well from 3-point range. And people were like, oh, is this it? Is this it? And the numbers eventually, like I always talk about the back of the card, the numbers eventually reverted to the back of the card in his case. Here's why I'm concerned about it, Joe, because preventing teams from scoring in the paint and preventing teams from scoring beyond the 3-point line have been the 2 biggest emphasis in the NBA in recent seasons. And paint scoring prevention is a major emphasis for all the elite teams. So we talk about the struggles against the elite teams, right? You know what pretty much a lot of the elite teams have in common? They don't let you have your way in the paint. That's not how Houston rolls. That's not how Oklahoma City rolls. That's not how Boston rolls. A lot of these teams that you say, hey, who's at the top of the league? That's kind of how they make their money. And the Grizzlies are solid in that area as well. But the one team that stands out to me is OKC, and we saw it. And I say all that to say is if you look at the numbers this season, in the games where Ja struggled for the most part, it's usually against those teams that are very good at protecting the paint, where he's forced to shoot more. And you have to ask yourself right now, over the course of a playoff series, you say, oh, can Ja shoot 40% over a 6 to 7 game stretch from 3-point range? He's done it before. I mean, he's done it before. But over the totality of a postseason run, because we're not talking about one playoff series win, right? I don't think anybody listening to this show right now is saying, oh, I just want to see the Grizzlies get one playoff series win and I'll have the time of my life. Like, I think people would be happy with a Western Conference Finals appearance. Like, you want to see this team do some things that they haven't really done before, which is win a Western Conference Finals game. But, Joe, I am concerned because I don't see how it can be fixed. And I think as the competition goes up, when you're playing the OKCs of the world, when you're playing those teams that have multiple guys around the rim who are going to deny Ja scoring at the basket, Phoenix doesn't have, that. That's why late in that fourth quarter, I talked about it on the show yesterday, Ja Morant just put his head down and said, you know what? The threes ain't falling. He put his head down and they weren't doing anything but fouling them or the shots were going in. It's a little bit tougher when you're going against OKC and those type teams. You're going to need to knock down some shots to beat those type of opponents.
The Knicks on Friday too, right? Karl Anthony Towns, all the really challenging games coming up. As you alluded to, the elite teams in the NBA have ways of slowing down your paint production. I am curious. The floater traditionally is not an efficient shot, right? Like that is not something that coaches go into it saying you need to perfect this. They want you finishing at the rim. They want you shooting threes. The floater might as well be a mid-range shot. In my opinion, he needs to really prioritize that. I don't need to see him pulling up at the elbow like Devin Booker and trying to drain DeMar DeRozan style mid-range jumpers. I want to see him understanding, and he understands this, obviously. You see him making the connection, but as you alluded to, a lot of times he just puts his head down, drives through. He has to get the shot over top of whatever coverage is going against him. I would like to see that floater a little bit more than we've seen in recent games.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And again, teams are preparing for it. I think that's another important distinction. And
that's fair.
They had the ability with Steven Adams, and I've been meaning to ask Ja about this, like because I've seen Steven Adams teaching Rockets players the whole screen. When he used to set the screen for Ja, and he'd pick his man and pick the guard and try to create, even more lanes for Ja naturally without setting illegal screens. I wanted to see coming into the season, is that something that Ja will work on with Zach Edey or or some of the other bigs. And we've seen Steven Adams take it to Houston with him, which is why some of those guards are having success. But yeah, you don't see Ja getting as many clean looks. It's partly because, the system is more dribble drive now, right? I talked about it on yesterday's show. He's not playing at the top of the key exclusively as much as he did in the past, right? Now you see there are packages where Desmond Bane is the initiator of offense. Ja Morant goes to the corner. There's packages where Jaren Jackson Jr. is the initiator of the offense. Ja Morant goes to the corner. He's a floor spacer in those roles. So it's a little bit different. But no matter what role you're playing in, at the end of the day, you got to put the ball in the cup. And that comes down to making shots, making some mid-range jumpers, making some three-point shots. He's capable. We've seen it. We've seen Ja make three-pointers. We've seen Ja have games where he makes 5, 6 three-pointers. But at the same time, do we trust it over the course of a full series is the question. I don't right now. He's remarkable at what he's great at. I'm the paint scoring that you're referencing. I'm not worried about that. I think that eventually this is a guy, we saw him lead the league in paint scoring before. I'm not worried about that. Teams are planning, and they're basically, the Suns were daring him at the basket a lot in that game. But it's the shooting, mid-range, and the three-point shot. Those are the ones that I'm kind of like, let's see how this plays out the rest of the way.
Let us know how you're feeling about Ja Morant's shooting woes this season. Hit us up on X at Damichael C or at Joe Mullinax. Obviously, the comments are oftentimes hopping, especially on YouTube. Let us know what you're thinking about Ja and his shooting. Again, the greatness of Ja Morant, I don't think Damichael and I are really questioning that when he's on, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that more here momentarily. But the overall sample size is big enough now to say it's a cause for concern. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to talk about closing moments of a game, who should be the alpha, who should be the one taking the last shot, ball in his hands, all of those cliches. With a Grizzlies team that has a couple of guys that maybe have a claim to that throne now. We'll talk about it next. Stick around. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature. It keeps every moment of the game exciting. I never feel like I've missed a chance, whether it's a player hitting a clutch three, hoping for a late game rally, and the app is extremely easy to use. And when you win, you can get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the National Basketball Association. So I've sold this as a segment, right? We talked before the show and you gave some great ideas for things to talk about today and tomorrow with no Grizzlies basketball happening, next game happening on Friday. And this was a good topic. And I realized after thinking on it a little bit more, it's probably a short segment, at least for me. It's a short segment, and everybody that's an everydayer,
we got a lot to talk about.
Everybody that's an everydayer knows that that's not true. I could talk to a wet paper bag about how to dry out, but
it makes you Joe Mullinax, exactly.
Something like that. Sean Coleman, our good friend Sean Coleman at Stats SAC, former host here on Locked On Grizzlies.
Yeah, I shared this one yesterday, Joe. I shared it.
Oh, you did? Well, I'm going to read it because I think it is very relevant to our conversation.
Really good stat.
Since per shot data began in 1996-1997, 200 NBA players have attempted more than 10 career shots to either tie or take the lead with 2 or less seconds left in the fourth or overtime of a game. That's regular season or playoffs. Only one of those 200 people is shooting at least 50% on those shots, and that's Ja Morant. So for me, Damichael, and you're right, you did mention this on yesterday's show, but we're looking at this through the context of who do you want taking the final shot? That's how I'm looking at it. Maybe the number one option thing, you're going to take the overall view of a game. And I do think there's a differentiation there. Mm-hmm. And it worked out for Memphis against Phoenix. Jaren Jackson Jr. was like the starting pitcher and Ja Morant was the closer. Right? And
you're trying to take my answer before I even say anything, but I'm go ahead. I'm listening.
I think that's what I'm leaning towards, and I'll let you more completely explain. because Jaren is having an offensive season that is the opposite of what Ja is having. He is having a career best year. So if Ja wants to, and to be honest with you, when Ja is at his best, that kind of plays into his desire to get others involved early in the game, and then he kind of takes over late. So I'm using that baseball with, everybody reported now for spring training.
That's right.
I see Jaren as the starter. I see Ja as the closer. And Desmond Bane is that catch-all, do everything you need in between.
Yeah, he's the guy who can start some games, be a middle reliever when some guys
a utility player.
Yeah. There you go. Here's the way that I look at it. I'm going to take the cheap way out, but I'm going to make it make sense here. I think that in a way you have multiple number one options. I don't think now here's where I'll avoid the cheap route or the easy route, or so to speak. I don't think that the Grizzlies should designate either of those guys, Jaren Jackson Jr. or Ja Morant, and say, you are the number one option. I don't think that should be the case.
It makes it too easy for the opposing team.
Makes it too easy for the opposing team. There are opponents that Jaren Jackson Jr. can destroy with his eyes closed, and Ja Morant will struggle against them. There are opponents that Jaren Jackson Jr. would struggle with, and Ja Morant can destroy with his eyes closed. It's a matchup-based game, and there are opponents that both of them can really cook. Like Phoenix is a team. I mean, Ja struggled shooting the ball, but Phoenix doesn't have a lot of rim protection. Jaren Jackson Jr. was 11 or 13 from the field. Look, it's simple to me. When you talk about the idea of number one option, unless there's a clear big gap, which I don't think there is in this case, because because I think we both lean Ja when the game's on the line, right? I'm with you on that.
Absolutely.
I'm with you on that. And the eye test could have told us exactly what our guy Sean Coleman said as well. Like, we've seen it time and time again. We've seen so many finishes. We've seen him barely miss some, where it's like, that Golden State game. Remember, I think it was game 1 or game 2 of that series.
Absolutely.
In Memphis, where he just missed that one. Like, it's been plenty of those moments. But I'm leaning with this conversation, say, hey, both these guys can be your number one. I don't think you should designate either of these guys as your number one option. It's matchup dependent. We talk about matchups a lot, especially with Western Conference teams. There are going to be games where, this is Ja's night. There are going to be games where, this is Jaren tonight. And perfect example of, like, if I wanted to counter you, because I'm putting the ball in Ja's hands with the game on the line. I'm with you 100%. But there's a stat. If there was someone out there that said, I'm leaning Jaren, you know what they could throw back at you, Joe? They could say, right now, Jaren Jackson Jr. is right there amongst the best in the league in fourth quarter scoring. And he's averaging about 6.7 points in the fourth quarter, which puts him 11th in the NBA right now. Of those 10 players in front of him, only two of those players have a better fourth quarter field goal percentage than Jaren Jackson Jr. Know those two players are? One's Kevin Durant. You know who he is. Everybody knows who he is.
Durant. We're going to talk more about Kevin Durant here momentarily.
Yeah, we definitely are. And the other guy is Zion Williamson, who is, you would expect Zion Williamson to have a better field goal percentage based off of his playing style alone.
Zion, New Orleans has had a season that's kind of, fallen through the cracks due to injuries.
Yep.
Zion Williamson is sneakily having a really freaking good season down in New Orleans.
He's on the uptick, but the guys in that range with him. I mean, he has a higher field goal percentage than Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in the fourth quarter, arguably MVP. Donovan Mitchell, All-Star game starter. LeBron James, Norman Powell, Trae Young, Kyrie Irving, LaMelo Ball, who Joe just absolutely loves. He has a higher field goal percentage than all those guys. So, look.
I would have a higher field goal percentage in the fourth quarter than LaMelo Ball.
I knew you couldn't just let that one ride out. I knew you couldn't. But yeah, Jaren has been a very good player in the fourth quarter as well. So I think you go into a fourth quarter and you can stagger them a little bit. You can play off of both guys depending on, and you let the defense dictate it, right? Like Ja talks about that a lot. I'm going to let the defense, while being aggressive. And Jaren talks about it too. They draw doubles. I'm going to kick it out. They play me one-on-one. I'm going to, you let the defense dictate some of those things. And sometimes in the past, we've seen defenses be able to kind of wall up against Ja, right? Wall up against Ja now. and have Jaren Jackson Jr. on the court with him, with the ability to close games, with the ability that he's shown in this fourth quarters of this season. So my answer is simple, Joe. Don't designate either of those guys as your, like, when the game's on the line, fill it out. Fill it out. It should never be just get this guy the ball, just fill the game out. Because even, and this might be controversial to some, but I'm going to say it because, that's what we do on here sometimes. We got to be controversial. But if Jaren didn't foul out against Phoenix, it would have been fair. It would have been fair to give him the ball in those situations, right? Right, Joe? Come on, back me up right here. Back me up a little bit.
Yes and no. Well, here's my logic.
11 of 13 from the field.
Yes, but
and look, again, I'm completely okay with Ja Morant because at the same time, like I said, Phoenix couldn't stop him either. But if they went to Jaren and he missed the shot and everyone said, "Why didn't you go to Ja?" I didn't think that would have, that wouldn't have been.
No, I wouldn't have said that.
Yeah.
I still would have wanted the ball in Ja's hands. And you're going to know where I'm going with this pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. You said something earlier where they both talk about when a double team comes and they're going to find somebody on the kick out.
I know where you're going.
There is one person who I trust to find that person on the kick out.
Me too.
And there's one person that I do not trust.
Me too.
The person that I trust is Ja Morant.
Yep.
Jaren Jackson Jr. as a passer, I do not trust. Mm-hmm. And that, for me, is the difference with the game on the line. It's not just making the right decision for you. It's making the right decision for the best shot within the scheme.
Not even just with the passing, the offensive fouls and, bowling over a guy. Like, Ja's not going to do those things.
Yes, Ja is much more crafty with his body and how he finishes at the rim. Let Damichael and I know, who do you think should be the number one option? Sounds like we agree it's kind of a 1A, 1B, but
there you go.
Games on the line, I want the ball in Ja Morant's hands, and I think Damichael is with me on that. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we'll close out this episode. Reportedly, according to ESPN, Kevin Durant almost certainly will be traded by the Phoenix Suns this summer. You know what that means. We're on Grizzlies. We're on KD watching Memphis. Will he decide for a third time to shun the Grizzlies, or will he finally come to Memphis? Does it make sense for it to happen at this stage? We'll talk about that next. Stick around. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privileges of the very privileged are no longer exclusive. With Robinhood Gold, your annual IRA contributions are boosted by 3%, plus you also get 4% APY on your cash and non-retirement accounts. That's over 8 times the national savings average. The perks of the high net worth are now available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive your 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk, rates subject to change. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold at $5 a month for 1 year from first match. Must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to Robinhood.com/boost. Over 8 times the national savings account interest rate claim is based on data from the FDIC as of November 18th, 2024. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. Oh, heck, Damichael, here we go again. Kevin Durant about to get traded, supposedly, in the 4 or 5 months.
Here we go.
The usual suspects, the Golden State Warriors, are going to find a way to make it work. Maybe the Dallas Mavericks, Nico Harrison feeling the pressure after trading away one of the best young players, perhaps in the history of the National Basketball Association. Going to try to add KD to a championship contender for the Mavericks. And then, of course, are our Memphis Grizzlies, right? And the Memphis Grizzlies, who have been in on KD not once but twice and have been denied not once but twice, depending on the tea leaves that you read, and you're more tuned in than me, Damichael. Yeah. Memphis might have had the best offer in one of those situations. And KD said, no thanks, right? Hard to believe that Zach Kleiman, Grizzlies GM, is just all of a sudden going to say, nah, I'm good on KD now.
Yeah.
We've said in the past, does it make sense to move on from Bane, Jaren, and Ja? Or one of those three, I should say. Does it make sense to move on from Bane, Jaren, or Ja in any KD move? I have said no in the past. And basketball logic, I still stand with no. If you're going all in, you want your best guys. Mm-hmm. However, Kevin Durant, before the show, we talked about this. I think $54 million is the number on his contract. He's a free agent after next season, so maybe you view it as a true all-in year.
Yeah.
How do you reckon the Grizzlies could actually pull off this kind of a trade? Because remember, Memphis is going to be, at least when the offseason officially begins, for a short time, Memphis is actually going to be under the salary cap, right? Like they're going to be under that number. It's not going to last very long because there's going to be money spent, but they will be there for some time.
Yeah.
Trades can occur. Flexibility comes with that reality in terms of how you interact with the salary cap.
Right.
Does it make sense for the Grizzlies to try an all-in year where they go Bane, Ja, Jaren, and KD, similar to some of the stuff that you heard about Jimmy Butler, right? If Butler had come, even if he opted in, it's a 1-year deal. You have a short-term window for competition because you're not going to go into the second apron. You're dangerously close to the second apron if you make that deal without moving on from a Bane or a Ja or a Jaren. For me at this point, I would love to see KD in Memphis. Is it worth moving on from Desmond Bane for? I'm not sold on that idea.
Can I do a short vent real quick?
Yes, please.
Okay, because
this is a safe space.
This is why this conversation that we're about to have, this is exactly why I kept saying going into the trading deadline, don't think it's right to trade Marcus Smart right now. Just wait a little bit longer. Some people took that, you're trying to keep Marcus Smart. No. Just wait until the summer. And now you see what type of conversations we got to have? You just mentioned the idea of trading Desmond Bane as part of this package potentially because of the fact that you don't have the Marcus Smart contract anymore. If you had the Marcus Smart contract, I'd be a little bit more intrigued by the idea because you could make a quote-unquote all-in type of move while keeping your 3 core guys. I don't even think it mathematically, let alone logically, makes sense for Phoenix or, the numbers even will crunch out where there's a way you could go get Kevin Durant without giving him Desmond Bane. So it's a different conversation now to me. It's one where, look, these are the big boy moves now. Like these are the moves. This is the move that Oklahoma City made, right? When they traded away James Harden and they were like, we gonna bring in, what was it, Jeremy Lamb, I think it was, and a couple other
Kevin Martin.
Kevin Martin.
Noted Grizzlies killer, Kevin Martin.
Yeah, 6-man Kevin Martin and all that. So this is the move that Boston made, right? When they went and got Kristaps Porzingis and traded away Marcus Smart, and people were like, we just traded away the heart and the soul, but it worked out for them. So it's tough because at the end of the day, you got to remember this is a business. So I know when you talk about the Grizzlies core, there's so many emotions tied to what these 3 guys can and have done for the Grizzlies. But I want to caution people that if you're one of those people saying, man, let's go get KD, how do you do it without giving up Desmond Bane? That's what I'm saying. My answer to that is TBD. Because I gotta see how Desmond Bane performs, not really the rest of the season. That whatever. I want to see how he performs in the playoffs. I want to see, okay, can I trust Desmond Bane more in the playoffs? We've seen Desmond Bane have a playoff series where he shot 50% from the field, 49% from the three-point line, and 90% from the free throw line while leading the Grizzlies in scoring in a playoff series. We've seen him do that. Proof's in the pudding there. But can you stack it up? Can you show I'm a proven playoff clutch time performer? Because that next series against Golden State, I was referring to that series, against the Minnesota Timberwolves. The next series against Golden State, back was bothering him, wasn't really that big of a factor in that series. The next year against the Los Angeles Lakers, did not have the greatest of series in that series as well. So I got to see more from Desmond Bane in the playoffs for me to kind of rule it out, is what I'm saying. Right now, not trade. I don't want to trade Desmond Bane. I don't even want to, even this is your core, right? You the emotions of you want to see the guy, we drafted these guys, they came up together. Like that's what everybody wants. But look around the league. That's not really realistic a lot of times. Like look at the past champions. They've had to part from some of those guys, right? And they had to win without them. So it's a tough conversation to have. But I will say this. If the Grizzlies had the opportunity and Desmond Bane does not perform well in the postseason, you listen, and Joe, you get your ear in that conversation because you have a Jalen Wells that if push comes to shove, you could slide him into that 2 spot and slide Kevin Durant there, and you can make it work.
I think that if Memphis went to Phoenix and they offered Desmond Bane, Gigi Jackson, and 3 first-round picks, that's probably too much for Kevin Durant at this point. But
this is a 1 year. This is 1 year. KD.
Right, you're renting. I'm agreeing with you.
This is 1 year, KD.
Say it's Bane, Gigi, and a pick, because I think it's safe to say teams would want Gigi over a second first-round pick. You make that offer to Phoenix. I'm not saying they say yes. I think they listen. I'm not saying that I do it. I'm saying I think about it. Because Kevin Durant, as the essentially third best player in theory on this team, that's a title contender. And again, you're talking about Jalen Wells. You're talking about Vince Williams Jr., Zach Edey. You still have the ability to use some mid-level exception and do some other things. If you hold on to that first-round pick, maybe you still have your first in the upcoming draft beyond KD, beyond 2026. I think that there is interesting possibility there. I'm not saying I would do it. I'm a big Desmond Bane guy.
Yeah, we both are.
It's Kevin Durant, right? And again, people like to say, no way, KD is washed. I don't know how you can watch that dude play basketball and say he's washed.
He's efficient.
And he doesn't have a game that is predicated on athleticism. That dude can be dropping buckets on people next year and for the next 3 or 4 years if he wants to. Yeah. So I think that, again, I'm not saying I'd say yes. I'm just saying I wouldn't immediately say no. And I agree the wait and see is an important piece of this too. If they make the Western Conference Finals, I don't know that you really do anything with the core and you just kind of tweak around.
Because it might not be worth it, right? Correct. It might not be worth it because you got to realize the ages of this core is important, right? But I don't want to vent too long about this one. We'll talk about this more in the offseason. It's like an off-season thing here. But I think the league now is kind of caught up to the social media trends of everything has to be instantaneous. And we don't let a lot of cores kind of go through like the troubles that it takes to get there. And I know the league is different now, and this is a very old school example, but I always throw out the Utah Jazz with Stockton and Malone, right? That was a team, that pair was together since like the mid-'80s, and they could never get there. Even both were really good. Both were arguably better in the early 90s and late 80s than they were in the mid-90s when they finally ran into the Bulls twice, when they finally got there pretty much in their mid to late 30s, at that point. So the point is sometimes it takes time, and sometimes it got to be the right season. Like we saw Devin Booker, take a Suns team to the finals because, the luck of the draw. They played the Clippers without Kawhi Leonard. LeBron James got hurt. Not LeBron James. Anthony Davis got hurt in the playoff series against them. So sometimes it works out that way. There are a lot of factors that go into it. It's hard to break up a core when you got guys bought in. Like that was the thing that I saw a lot of people saying when all the Jimmy Butler stuff was going on. They were saying, man, we got guys like Ja, Dez. I mean, I've talked to Dez after the Jimmy Butler stuff. And that's another reason why I'm just not going to easily depart with Dez, because Dez loves Memphis. Do you think Kevin Durant will come in here just, oh man, I'm ready to sign the contract extension right now? You don't got to work hard to get Desmond Bane to sign a contract extension. You didn't have to work hard to get Ja Morant to sign a contract extension. These dudes love Memphis, and that matters. Because
they were drafted here, right? And that matters a ton. Yeah. Friendly reminder, as fun as it is to dream about Kevin Durant, he has, in a roundabout way, depending on how you want to interpret it, I'm going to interpret it this way, rejected the Memphis Grizzlies not once, but twice. And he certainly did it in terms of the Brooklyn Nets deal. We have pretty concrete reporting that there was an offer standing for KD, and he said, no, thank you. So that's something to keep in mind. Thank you so much for hanging out with us on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. It is appreciated. We will close out the week tomorrow. Very excited for that episode. A big weekend. The homestand continues. Start spreading the news, Damichael. The New York Knicks are in town. I have a feeling we're going to talk about that a little bit on tomorrow's show.
Can't wait. This is what we call a get-back game, right? You remember what they did to the Grizzlies. They embarrassed them. I think the score exactly was 143-106. You don't forget stuff like that. It's an 82-game season. A lot of stuff goes in and out your brain. You don't forget that one, Joe.
No, and I think they're going to certainly focus on that in practice today and all those sorts of things, and they're going to be ready for the Knicks on Friday night in Memphis. Make sure you got your seat. Make sure you got the channel tuned in, all those sorts of things. We're going to talk about that and more on our next episode. Thank you so much for being with us on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube. Become an everydayer. Be a part of Damichael and I's Memphis Grizzlies journey each and every time that an episode drops. And make sure you are also checking out our newsletter. It's free. It's a daily newsletter in your inbox, lockedondaily.com. Grizzlies words from me, NBA analysis at large, fantasy basketball advice, so much more. LockedOnDaily.com. Check out our free daily newsletter. For Damichael Cole, I am Joe Mullinax. Stay locked in. We will catch you here on Friday to close out another week here on Locked On Grizzlies. Have a good one. Catch you later.